Good evening. Thank you all for coming to It Takes a Village, taking a closer look at interpreter education and community capacity. I'd like to welcome you, and the first thing I need to do, captioning and interpreters are provided. The streaming window opens automatically. There is a tab for the audio and video on the far right. Click on the bottom corner and a menu will drop down. Click Detach Panel, then you can resize the video box. To open the captioning, click on the captioning icon on the toolbar. Windows can be closed or sized to create your personalized viewing environment. If you have technical issues, use the chat function and a member of the Clearinghouse's staff will aid you.
Thank you very much, Carrie, and welcome everybody. I so appreciate all of you joining us on this lovely summer evening. I hope you are finding yourself in a nice location, perhaps near a window, and enjoying some cool temps or refreshing breezes on this August 23rd evening. Certainly the date tells us that summer is coming to a close. I am from Minnesota. I'm speaking to you from St. Catherine University in St. Paul, Minnesota. And one of the indications here in our state that summer is coming to a close is that today, August 23rd, is the first day of the Minnesota State Fair. And some people love the Minnesota State Fair. Some people don't care for the Minnesota State Fair. Some people don't care that we have a Minnesota State Fair. But and as we speak, as I'm speaking, I'm one of those folks who love it. And as I'm speaking, our Princess K of the Milky Way is probably sitting in a cooler with an artist working on a huge block of butter, carving the princess's image in that butter. That's one of our traditions here at the Minnesota State Fair. That and finding any food you can imagine on a stick. And so I'm looking forward to going to the Minnesota State Fair, but every time this day comes around, I have a bit of sadness because it's an indication to me that truly summer is coming to a close. And I'm sure that some of you in interpreter education programs, some of you have probably already started classes. Some of you have probably seen your email boxes swelling in anticipation of classes beginning. That's certainly true here. Our classes at St. Kate's don't start until after Labor Day, but my email box is starting to swell. But as we look at the beginning of a new academic year, it seems like a really good time to start to think about this idea that we're going to be exploring together tonight. And that is looking at the village it takes to educate interpreters, American Sign Language English interpreters, and specifically through the lens of capacity. Looking at capacity in our communities around interpreter education. And this is a question that I have been thinking about quite a bit over the past several months and the last few years that I've been in interpreter education. I am an assistant professor here at St. Kate's. I'm the department chair of our American Sign Language Interpreting Department. And I specifically, one of my duties within our department is to coordinate the internship placements for our interpreting students. And so this idea of capacity has kind of come up in a variety of different ways, and certainly this idea of community involvement and capacity has come up in a variety of different ways. And so I have been thinking about this in terms of the history of interpreting. I've been an interpreter almost 30 years. And so I'm one of those people who went through an interpreter education program, but really credit my education and my growing up as an interpreter to the deaf community, in the community where I spent much of my time in the beginning part of my career. I say, I got my degree in interpreting from this institution, but I really grew up as an interpreter because of the deaf community in St. Cloud, Minnesota. They were the folks that helped me grow up as an interpreter. And so as I look at the history of interpreting and I look at that shift moving from community to an academic environment, I think about community and what that means and capacity and how we as programs are challenged to maintain that connection and how we do that and the capacity for that. I think about the value that has been a part of the interpreting community and certainly the deaf community over the years, and that is this concept of giving back to the community. And over the years in my work, I have seen certainly the perspective on that value changing in the community in certain areas. I think of this concept of capacity certainly in terms of internship and internship placements as I've worked in that area, and I have been a part of conversations in the greater St. Catherine University environment where coordinators of field work placements, internship, practicum, student teaching, interpreting, which is my perspective, we come together regularly and talk about the challenges of doing our work and doing it well and supporting students in those areas. So as I've been thinking about this and offering questions up with my colleagues in the department and colleagues across the university and in the field, I approached the folks at the Katie Center and in collaboration with the folks at the Do It Center and the Marie Center and asked if we might be able to use a webinar seminar or webinar format to kind of explore collectively these questions about capacity and the challenges that we might be facing as interpreter educators. Certainly looking at the challenges and the questions, but also the strengths and the strategies that we are incorporating and using. And I wanted to bring this to our field in the form of a collective conversation, which is what we're kind of doing this evening. I've invited very well-respected colleagues who also work in highly regarded programs to this conversation to serve as our panelists this evening. They represent programs that offer both bachelor's degrees and associate degrees to help us start exploring some of the questions about capacity in our field. And I certainly don't come to this thinking that there is a specific finite set of resources per se in this area in terms of capacity, but I do think that by exploring some of these questions together, that's an important process. And certainly, while the responses and our insights on these questions are important, so are the questions that may be raised as a result of these conversations, which I think is the beauty of this forum, that we'll use this webinar as a means for starting to explore some of these questions and raising more questions that we can collectively start unpacking and thinking about together. So that's why we have the starting of this conversation, and then we have a listserv. Every one of the questions that the panelists are asked to share their thoughts about tonight are posted on the listserv in different discussion forums. So after this conversation, I encourage you to think about your thoughts and your perspectives on this. And make sure you go to the listserv and share your ideas and your questions. Certainly, as Carrie mentioned, throughout the evening, you will have the opportunity to type your questions in this chat box. And I will go over those and kind of review those and offer those up to the panelists as our time allows. And if there are questions that we don't get to, or if you don't have an opportunity to share those in the chat box, definitely head to the listserv, because I will make some summary statements and review those and pull those to the listserv, but I invite you to do that as well. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our panelists. We have Linda Stauffer from the University of Arkansas at Little Rock. We have Lawrence Hayes from Eastern Kentucky University. We have Stacy Storm from Johnson County Community College in Overland Park, Kansas. And we have Lori Metcalf from San Antonio College. And I'm going to ask each of them now to introduce themselves more fully. And Linda, you want to get us started? Thank you.
Thanks, Paula, and thanks for the invitation to be here tonight. I am with the University of Arkansas at Little Rock. I am an associate professor and program coordinator for the interpreter education program. I've been here 26 and a half years, hard to believe, but I still love it. And we offer, starting today, as a matter of fact, a new 2-year associate degree in American Sign Language Studies. This replaces our AA degree in interpreting, which we terminated last year and which began in 1979. We also have a bachelor's degree in interpretation, ASL English, and a required educational interpreting minor. We also offer a sign language studies minor for non-majors. We've been asked to tell the number of faculty. We have 4 full-time faculty and 4 to 5 part-time faculty. We have close to 400 students, but we also offer ASL at our university to satisfy the second language requirement or foreign language requirement. So we have a variety of students pursuing different goals. Out of that, about 80 are majors at the moment. We're asked to make a brief statement of distinction about our program. I think we do partnership very well. We partner with our local community college. They offer sign language classes. We coordinate course numbers, curriculum, even tests. We share tests. So their students are getting the exact same course, including testing that the students here get, and so they become a strong feeder program for our program. We also offer our bachelor's degree in Oklahoma on the campus of Tulsa Community College, and we will be graduating our second cohort in spring of 13, and I believe one of the participants from our first cohort is on tonight. So I do believe collaboration and partnership is important, and I think that makes us a little bit unique. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Linda. Next, I'd like to introduce Lawrence Hayes from Eastern Kentucky University.
Hi, thank you. This is Lawrence. I appreciate the opportunity to join in. And Linda, you've been at this a little bit longer than I have. This starts year number 24 at EKU for me. And I think one of the things that I've seen change so much with our program, just looking back, is I started as one person, like many programs are out there, single, 1 or 2 faculty, maybe a staff person, and I watched part of the evolution, and that's one of our distinctions. I'll mention that in a second. But we are located in Richmond, Kentucky, a small college university town, about 35,000 people. In the town, there are 16,000 students at EKU. We're a public university. We're about 25 miles south of Lexington, Kentucky. In terms of our program, we offer a bachelor's degree in ASL English interpretation, and we offer a bachelor's degree in deaf studies. We became a department, standalone department, in 2007, Department of American Sign Language Interpreter Education. Before that, we were joined with special education, which traditionally and historically really is where a lot of programs evolve from. Looking at our faculty, we're very fortunate, including myself, there's 12 faculty, and I'm chair of the department, but I fill 2 roles. I am faculty and chair. 3 of those faculty are involved in outreach, and I'll explain what that is in just a minute for our purposes. And then we have 3 full-time lab people, and they are graduates of the Kentucky School for the Deaf, and I'll explain a little bit about that a little bit later on too. But our key distinction, I think, in addition to offering the degrees, I think one of the things that we do that makes us kind of unique is our outreach. I've got 3 faculty, as I mentioned, who do outreach full-time. That's their full job. We offered about 30 workshops around the state last year. We bring in people from local level to national level. We had about 1,200 participants. And that's one of the ways that we interact with the community, because our area, specifically Richmond, does not have a large deaf community at all. So we try and provide opportunities, learning opportunities, and opportunities to interact with a variety of professionals, a variety of agencies, and diverse perspectives through our outreach and workshop. Thank you.
Thanks, Lawrence. Next, I would like to introduce Stacy Storm, who is representing Johnson County Community College. Stacy? This is Paula. I'm not hearing Stacy. Jesse, do you want to chime in and help us here?
Stacy, can you turn on your microphone and click on the talk button?
This is Paula, and it looks like Stacy does have her microphone on. Her little icon is on, and she is typing that in our chat box. I think what I'd like to do is perhaps have Jesse and Stacy kind of converse on the chat box a bit, and I'll move on to Lori Metcalf and have Lori from San Antonio College introduce herself, and Stacy will come back to you. Thanks. Lori, can you click on your microphone and share an intro with us?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we sure can. Thank you.
Okay. So this is Lori Metcalf, and I thought I was on before, but let me just tell you, we are San Antonio College in San Antonio, Texas. Actually, there's another San Antonio, Mount San Antonio, that has an interpreter training program in California, but we happen to be the one in San Antonio, Texas. And I believe that many of you were here with us in San Antonio at CIT a couple of years ago, and then also at RID before that. Our program started in 1994. There had been ASL classes for a long time, and then in 1994 I was hired to start that program that we have now. We have an Associates of Applied Science in ASL interpreting, and we also have another part of our program called Deaf Support Specialist, and that is really for people who want to become paraprofessionals in a public school or job coaches working with deaf people in other situations in addition to interpreting. We have 10 full-time faculty, 8 of which are tenured, and about 800 students taking courses. As I think as Linda said, we have people taking courses to become interpreters or deaf support specialists, and we also have people taking courses to become using it for their foreign language requirement. I've been here since the beginning, so 1994. I'm thinking that this is my 39th year in the field of deafness, interpreting deaf education, and I'm thinking, oh my goodness, I have people that started way before me and are gone, and I'm still going and still loving my job, as Linda said, so I'm happy to do that. I think one of the things that we're very proud of, just like I think many of the other programs that are with us tonight, is we recently received our CCIE accreditation, and that was certainly a long process and something that we're very proud of. Our college is the largest community college, I believe, single campus. We have 23,000 students here, and we've been very fortunate to have strong support from our president, who's been with us since the beginning of the program, along with our dean and vice president. So we are feeling that we are in a very good place with a lot of support from our college.
Wonderful. Thank you, Lori. Stacy, I'm going to come back and see if your mic is working yet.
Hi, Paula. We're still working on it, so just go ahead with another presenter. Thanks.
Okay, Jessie, thank you. We have introduced all of our panelists with the exception of Stacy. So I think what we'll do is I will watch for the signal that says Stacy is ready to roll, and then we will come back to Stacy's introduction. So what I'd like to do now is start with our first question. And that first question, in terms of exploring this idea of interpreter education and community capacity, is, generally speaking, how is your community involved in your program? And when I say community, I would like each of you to just explain how you define community. We have a question a little bit later that talks about the deaf community, but this community in this question is more generally speaking, and if you could speak to how you're defining that, what community you're speaking of when you talk about their involvement in your program. And with that, what changes have you noticed in this involvement over the years? Have you noticed any signs of reaching capacity with that community in terms of their involvement in your program, and why or why not do you think that's the case? And so, Lawrence, we are going to start with you.
Thank you. I think this is a really fine line of not wearing out the community, whether it's the deaf community or what we're going to talk about tonight right now is the professional community of other interpreters plus agencies and entities that may hire our graduates or may provide internships for them. Let me go ahead and talk about the community in terms of the agencies, entities, and interpreters that we interact with and that may ultimately provide internship sites for our students and or provide mentoring for our students, or a combination of those things. A couple things we've done to try and reach somewhat of a balance, which is always difficult to do, is with our faculty and staff, I've tried really hard to bring that part of the community, the professional faculty and staff, into our program who are deaf. And we've been very fortunate that about 50% of our faculty and staff are deaf. And that brings something to us that we don't have to go out and search for. We have people on faculty and staff to help bring that unique culture and language internally. The challenge for that is that we really don't have a large metropolitan community for us to deal with locally. As I said, we're 16,000 at the university and about 35,000 in the city. So we've done a really, I don't know if I'd call it an excellent job, but a really focused job on getting out and working with entities and community people in terms of interpreters and so on and so forth. Let me tell you how we're doing that. I mentioned earlier our outreach, and then I've got 3 faculty that is their primary duty, that what they do is go out and provide workshops, and they provide workshops with a focus on educational interpreting for K through 12 interpreters, vocational rehabilitation interpreters. We're working with people in mental health, trying to provide some of the workshops that focus on them. and their needs. We're working with the administrative office of the courts to try and provide training for people who may wish to go into legal interpreting. But beyond the interpreting aspect, we're also partnering with those entities and agencies, for example, vocational notation or KDE. We're trying to share what we do with them in a bigger picture than just the interpreter in the classroom, so they will better understand what our university can do to provide workshops and training and outreach to them. Concurrently, we invite them in. And we've been very fortunate in the sense, specifically with vocational notation here in Kentucky and Department of Education. They have partnered with us in the sense of providing us grant funding. Now, this certainly hasn't happened overnight by any stretch, and it has taken years. We started getting a small partnership financially with Voc Rehab Kentucky and Department of Education Kentucky back in the mid-90s. So that has provided us with a partnership so that we go to them, we find out what they need, we try and provide that training and outreach to them, but we also invite them to come in and understand what we do in a bigger picture of just providing a graduate to go to work for their agency. That seems to have helped a lot. In terms of interpreters, by our outreach and our workshops across the state, it helps us to network and work with other professional interpreters across the state so that we can build a rapport with them so that when we do get to that point, they can be either mentors for interpreting, or if we're working with the deaf community, and I'm going off track here a little bit, at those workshops and meeting individuals across the state, they provide mentoring and work with our students. So that's one of the ways that we try and do this. In terms of just simply not wearing out the agencies, one of the things we have done as a program, which seems to have helped us a lot in a lot of ways, is we've gone to an approach where we take a cohort of students every 2 years. In other words, we start a new group of students this fall. They go through full-time. We do not take any part-time students. They go through full-time through junior and senior year and graduate. In that last semester of their senior year, they have a full-time internship, 12 credit hours, 450 contact hours. And so we're really only approaching the agencies locally, statewide, regionally, and nationally every 2 years and asking them to take our students. And I've heard it said from a number of people that we know pretty well, Lawrence, if you were coming to us every year or every semester with this, we'd have to turn you away. But because you're only coming in every 2 years, it makes it easier. Still not a perfect setting, but it makes it a lot easier. So as a program that works well for us, our freshman and sophomore year students take prerequisites and interview for the program at the spring semester of their sophomore year, and they're admitted to the program, limited enrollment, and then they again go through as a cohort. So I guess one of our strengths in terms of doing that is the outreach component that we have to help build those bridges, to help reach out to folks, and the other part is not to wear out our welcome, is to try and do that major push every 2 years for our internships. To answer an earlier question, yes, I have definitely seen a shift in terms of capacity. It used to be that seemed easier to make those connections, to go out, because people were seeing us as an emerging profession. And now that we've been around for a while and we're a profession, I think it's harder to keep that motivation by the agencies, by the entities going at the same level. It's just something that I think as you work with people over the years, people either are more interested in helping and partnering, or they just simply, quite honestly, they say, look, we can't do this day in and day out, which again, I'm coming right back to why we do this every 2 years. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Lawrence. Thank you. I'm going to ask Lori to make a brief response to Lawrence's comments and then offer her own. And we will do this, as you can see on the slide. Linda will do the same for Lori's. And then Stacy, I'd like you to, when you are up here, add your introduction and then go ahead and do your response. Okay, we'll take it that way. So, Lori?
Okay, great. Lawrence, well, we're not a great big metropolitan area. Those of you who are familiar know that Austin is kind of the mecca of the deaf community because of the School for Deaf is there and how large it is. And people, when we started the program, we were going, oh my gosh, San Antonio College will never make it because there's not a big deaf community or a strong organized deaf community. There was no deaf club here when we started, and there's still no deaf club. But I think we have kind of become the place where deaf people gather for some different events. Because we have a lot of rooms in our program that are available, and the college has been very supportive of letting us sponsor different events for the deaf community, lots of town hall meetings, and times that the deaf community gets together and using our facilities. And so that has helped us in kind of that reciprocity where we are giving, I think, back to the community in that we just had this discussion today at a faculty meeting that some of the faculty are saying, well, you know, the deaf community is not as involved as they were 15 years ago when we had a lot of deaf events in, you know, we had a party every month. It seemed like a Halloween party, and our students were there, and the deaf community came, and we certainly don't have that as much anymore. And part of that is the college culture is, you know, they're not so willing to sponsor those things as they were before. But I think in general, I mean, I grew up in Denver, and I certainly grew up in the deaf community in Denver. In fact, it's kind of funny, I grew up in the Silent Athletic Club, the SAC, and I teach at SAC now, and I was just there this last weekend. My mother passed, and you know, the deaf clubs in Denver and in Austin and most other places, the deaf community is not coming there like they did in my parents' generation or era, and I think we see that here as well, is that the deaf community has lots of other avenues now with video phones and Sorensen and Purple and all the other places that they have, and as well as texting and Facebook and the social media. So we don't see as much deaf community as we did in the past. One of the things that makes us really unique is that in 2000, about 6 years after the program started, I went to the college administration and asked if they would consider putting interpreter services under our umbrella. And after a lot of talking and convincing, they went ahead and did that. And so the Department of American Sign Language and Interpreter Training is also now Deaf and Hard of Hearing Services. And so that gives us a whole different avenue, because we employ 5 or 6 full-time interpreters and about 50 part-time interpreters. And so we have a lot of different avenues for our students to go to that we really don't tap into the community as much, because of having those having the interpreter services under our umbrella. And we're able to provide interpreting for every event on campus. So our interpreters students get to have a lot of different experiences, town hall meetings, and you know, the Catholic men's group, and lots of different experiences, as well as what we do out in the community. But we don't do a lot with agencies, so we don't have that same kind of issues with burnout. And part of that is we've had some problems with agencies wanting to use interpreters students in a different way than we felt like was appropriate, and so we kind of backed off on that, and we wanted our students to have different experiences as opposed to just being in one third grade classroom all day. And so having deaf and hard of hearing services under us has given us a little bit more flexibility, I think, than we had in the past before that. So, you know, our situation is a little bit different.
All right, thank you very much, Lori. Excellent. Linda, would you respond to Lori's comment and add your own thoughts on this question, please?
Yes, I think both Lawrence and Laurie mentioned the importance of giving back. I think that when it becomes mutually profitable doesn't sound like the right word, but not just the students taking, but that there's some benefit and give and take, that the deaf community or any community is much more likely to be excited about being involved. As far as our program, we do have deaf instructors, full-time and part-time. Our lab assistant who works full-time is deaf, and she literally takes students under her wing and takes them into deaf community events, even has taken them to national conferences out of state. So she lives to interact with students, and that's been a wonderful, wonderful addition to our program. We have a stakeholders group, and they meet every year, and they involve anyone who has any interest or stake in our program, and that includes members of the deaf community and deaf-blind community. We have language tutors who are deaf. Our students will seek out deaf people who are willing. We also are strong on service learning. We have a service learning project for the interpreting for persons who are deaf-blind, and under the tutelage of our instructors and also mentors that are hired, we provide the interpreting services for, it's called Deaf-Blind Camp, but it's a several-day event, and it's become multi-state. So sometimes we take students to Louisiana, sometimes those students come here, and I believe parts of Texas have now joined this. Students love it, and it provides a real service to deaf-blind consumers. We also have a large program of interpreted music during this semester when we have our artistic interpreting class, and the deaf community participates. The kids from the school attend. It's free. It's open to the public, and we fill the main floor and the balcony of our theater here on the campus. We have deaf members involved in our benchmark exams. In fact, we have a reciprocal arrangement with the School for the Deaf, whereby we are all trade raters, and we rate their employees and they rate our students, and that's all free of charge, which is a wonderful way to approach it. And there are deaf members on our state credentialing exam. We have, in the recent years, not required ASL1 students to go out in mass to community events in order to fulfill an assignment, such as to talk to someone. Instead of going to 3 community events, we encourage them to go, but it's okay to sit back and watch and interact if they feel comfortable. And so we reduce the number of interactions until the students have more language. We find the deaf community is much more receptive to talking to students if the students actually can participate in a discussion or a communication. So we've seriously looked at how we program those requirements. We have deaf students on campus. They tend to hang out in our lab, and we have deaf folks at agencies who work with our interns. So within the deaf community, we find a variety of ways, and we have video phones, and there are some people who are more than happy to speak to our students over the video phone, and our deaf lab director she takes charge of that and makes sure that that's not abused. So we seek people's permission first. We work with a larger community. We're the capital city. We're in the middle of the state. We're not a terribly large state like Texas, so it's easy to get around our state. We have the School for the Deaf here. We have the rehab services here. We have the court interpreter with the administrative office of the court here, a large deaf-blind community that's very active, an active deaf community. So we're very fortunate that we have a considerable amount of resources literally outside our door. We also work with public schools, the Association for the Deaf, the RID chapter, ARS. We have a Sorensen video service here. Just talked to them today. They say about 60% of their interpreters come from our graduates of our program at some point, and they want to do more to reach out to our students. Public schools, gosh, it just goes on and on. So I really think that by being purposeful about who and where you send out to the community, and also making sure that there's ample opportunity for students to give back. We do have volunteer services, but they have to come through me or one other person, because, for example, there's 10 units at our big retirement center, which is set aside now for people who are deaf. And so they need interpreters for bingo, for older deaf people, for yoga class, things that our upper level students can go and do and have fun and interact, but they're providing a service, and it's not taking away from a paid interpreter position. So we're also, in working with the senior citizens, there's a lot of need for that. So we're really looking at ways to appropriately be involved and also foster that spirit of giving back. And so we try to be innovative about how we involve our deaf students. I think because of that, there's less repetition of students going and asking the same people the same questions, and kind of a more intentional way of trying to incorporate deaf people into our program and students into the community in appropriate ways.
Wonderful. Thank you, Linda. See, I'm watching the chat box, and I just want to go back to Lori just for a moment. Lori, I apologize if I prematurely cut you off in your comments. Did you have anything more you wanted to add? Someone asked why I interrupted you, and I apologize. I thought the pause was my cue. But please, if you have something else to add that I prematurely cut you off, please do that now, and then we'll move on to Stacy.
No, you know me, Paula, I could talk forever. No, you didn't cut me off at all. So we're good, and I think that on our next questions, some of the things that I thought of afterwards, we'll get to them on our other questions. So I'm just fine.
All righty, Lori, thank you very much. All right, Miss Stacy, is that microphone working? Can we have you introduce yourself and then respond to this question, please?
Sure. Can everybody hear me?
Yes, I believe so. Thank you.
Oh, good. All right. I apologize for the technical glitch. For some reason, my microphone stopped working. So Jesse got me connected through the phone bridge, and I'll continue with my introduction. So as Paula said, I'm Stacy Storm, working at Johnson County Community College now. We are in Overland Park, Kansas, which is the Kansas City metro area. We're just 10 minutes away from Olathe, which is where the Deaf School is, the Deaf Cultural Center, the Deaf Club, etc. So we're very close to a large deaf community here. I have been here for 10 years. I actually just got my 10-year pin from the college, and I am currently co-chair with Daryl Luton and a professor here in the program. We offer two main programs. We have an ASL Studies certificate. It is what's called a post-secondary certificate at this institution. There are several of those in different lines of study. Recently, our foreign language department actually just instituted a legal interpreting post-secondary certificate for Spanish English, and they also have a healthcare interpreting certificate. We have yet to work with them for continuing education, but post-secondary certificates are something that Johnson County does quite a bit. So we have the ASL Studies certificate, which is not at all intended for people to become an interpreter. Some people take the ASL Studies and then decide to apply for our interpreting program, but it's basically for folks who want to learn about the deaf community, values, acquire require some conversational or basic fluency in American Sign Language. And then we also have our Applied Science program, our AAS degree, and that is in ASL English Interpretation. We've been, I think it's been since 1983 that we've been offering that program. And so those two programs are what we offer. We currently have 13 faculty, 4 of whom are full-time, and 9 adjunct. All of our adjunct professors are, let's see, out of the 9, we have 7 deaf adjunct professors and 2 who are either hearing or hard of hearing. Let's see, anything else that's a distinction of our program? We are very thrilled that we were accredited by the CCIE in 2010. We are currently working very hard at pursuing ways to either offer a bachelor's degree program or partner with an institution to do a bachelor's degree of some sort. So that's our focus at this point. All right, I will move on to answering the question. I know it feels a little awkward in terms of timing, so I thank you all for bearing with me. In terms of the first question that we have on the PowerPoint, we look here, the way that I'm thinking of community for this question is the greater community. Since the next question we have will get to the deaf community, I'll save the response related to deaf people in our community and how they're involved for that question. We do a lot of work trying to involve our interpreting community as well as just the non-deaf hearing community in any way that we can. The interpreting community, we of course rely a great deal on the experienced interpreters in our area to mentor and supervise our students in their 3rd and 4th semesters. I can't begin to thank those people enough. They are so critical for our students to have the success of, actually doing the work, being out there in their internship sites and being able to observe the experienced interpreters as well as being able to start doing the work themselves with supervision and support. There are probably, I would say 15 to 20 interpreters and or agencies that continue to work with us as we place our students in this area. We also work very hard to incorporate our alumni in our program. Many graduates stay in touch with students. We are on Facebook and continue to facilitate, current students with alumni and connecting them via social media, and I see that helps. Just yesterday, our classes started this last Monday, as Paula was saying. We definitely are already in our first week of classes, and some of the current second-year students were saying that somebody that graduated last year had already been sending out little supporting messages on Facebook to get them back into the swing of things. So our alumni also are involved with students, but also in the classroom. I often will invite graduates to come back and join us. If we're doing a translation assignment or having guests come in to do interpreting, then I'll ask alumni to come in and join us in conversation to share one of their translations. It provides a way for current students to see where they can end up in a year or two, and I think it allows that alum to come back in and kind of refresh some of the things that we do in the program. We also have working interpreters from the community come in as much as we can. We do some ethical decision-making discussions and panels where we institute something called a Think Aloud protocol, a TAP, where working interpreters and deaf people come in and sort of think aloud about different ethical scenarios. We have working interpreters come in when we have guests for interpreting practice, and those working interpreters observe and provide feedback to the student interpreters in a classroom setting where we have mock situations. So we do a lot of that throughout the year. We also have been able to Skype with interpreters throughout the country. So we have made agreements to, have an interpreter in another state Skype with us while we're all in a classroom, and that interpreter will share his or her experiences, advice. The students can ask questions, that sort of thing. That's been really fun to do. I incorporate commentary or surveys, I guess, from working interpreters throughout the country on our online courses, or even blended courses where, I just have a number of questions that I ask, and interpreters from all over are able to respond, and then I share that with students. We also have a great event that we do. It's been about, I think, 6 years now in the spring. That's a community presentation event where the second-year students, who are our seniors, because we're a community college, do a presentation. They present on some topic that they have a particular interest in, and they present in American Sign Language, and then the community is invited. Deaf people, practicum supervisors, the hearing interpreting students' family members, the college community, and they come and attend this. Second years actually provide English interpretation for one another, and there are forms that are available for people to provide feedback if they so choose. So it's been a nice way to involve the community, and it sort of takes on a senior showcase quality for both the interpreting work as well as the presentation. I feel like I've talked quite a bit. Those are the highlights, I think. One more thing that we do is the current students that work with us are very good at tapping into their community of people who are non-signers, so that we can have folks come in as guests and do as authentic as possible mock situations for students to gain practice. So hearing community members come into the classroom and engage in a conversation with deaf students or deaf communities or deaf people in the community. So that's a great way to have folks involved as well. So I guess I'll stop for now. I have more that I'll talk about on the next question.
All right. Stacy, thank you very much. Thank you very much. One of the things that, or a couple of themes that I've heard throughout the responses of our panelists so far in terms of community involvement, themes around being innovative and thoughtful around involving community, and being intentional about that. It sounds like some programs are very intentional in hiring members of specifically the deaf community, to be a part of the faculty, to be part of the system of academia and education. Other intentionality includes being thoughtful around how can the students actively give back to the community in which they are drawing benefit from. Lawrence even talked too about being intentional around requesting of internship placements of the community. So not asking every year for a lot of support in terms of internship, but being intentionally planful in the curriculum and doing that only 2 years. So this idea of innovation and intentionality and making the community involvement more part of the system are themes that I'm hearing. So thank you very much. Now I do know that some of you have involved or included in your responses already the deaf community involvement, which is the next question on the docket. But before we move, actually what I'm going to do is include this lovely slide, which is questions and comments from the participants, in with this next question. So here's what I'm thinking. So panelists, I'll ask you to respond to this question, and if you have an additional thought that you didn't make earlier about the deaf community involvement, please feel free to do so. If you feel like you have explored that concept, I'd like you to respond to a question that Lucy James has offered, and that is, how do you, if you do, involve your community within your academic institution, your college community? So do you see that as a helpful community to actively involve in your interpreter education program? And if you do, what does that look like? How do you do that? Okay, so we're going to incorporate Lucy's question along with this question around the deaf community, because some of the panelists have already addressed this. If you feel like you've done that sufficiently, or if you'd like to add a little bit to what you previously said, take a stab at Lucy's question, because I think it's a very good one that is a community we don't often think about. So Stacy, would you get us started on this one about the involvement of the deaf community, and what does that look like?
Sure. Thanks, Paula. I'll start by taking a stab at Lucy's question. I also have to just comment, this is the first time I've been involved in a webinar like this, so it's quite awkward for me not to see the faces of everybody I'm talking to. However, it's great to have your question, Lucy. So we do try to incorporate others within the college community. One thing that we do is, earlier I mentioned having mock situations where our students are interpreting for interactive sorts of discourse, and we utilize our writing center tutors, our math tutors, other instructors. We've had professors who have a deaf student come in and they have a conversation for the students to be able to practice. So that's one way that we use or work with our college community. We have an event going on tomorrow actually here that's called Campus Kickoff, and it's a large event that there's booths and vendors and all kinds of free food. The culinary program provides free food, and programs are out with information about their program and their employers in the area, student clubs, all kinds of things. And what we've done for the last 2 or 3 years is something kind of fun. We have our student interpreters who are currently able to, or at a level that they're able to, provide interpretation for things, for deaf students who want to go around to booths, for our faculty who, have prospective students kind of asking just general questions. So it's a way for them to get some authentic experience in a way that wouldn't really people wouldn't really have access to interpreting services because it's one of those awkward kinds of things that you wouldn't really hire an interpreter for, to be at every single booth. So that's a way for our college community to also be a part of, or us to be a part of, the greater college community. So those are the two things that come to mind right away. I will move on to the second question, which is members of the deaf community. This is one of the things I feel very grateful for in our area. I mentioned that we're very close to the Deaf Club, the Deaf Cultural Center, and the Deaf School, and we are blessed to have a number of people in the deaf community very involved in our program. As I mentioned before, about 70% of our faculty are deaf, hard of hearing, or deaf-blind, and so in and of itself, that provides us a link to the deaf community. We also have lab assistants who are deaf, who are always available in the lab and work with students, deaf students who are around who sometimes are in the lab or just around campus. We also very much work to have deaf people come into our classroom as guests, as panelists, as often as we can. We have a silent weekend that happens for our students only, and at that weekend, usually 20 deaf people from the community attend with us, and they attend as quote-unquote students also. We found that's a way for deaf people in the community to also learn more about their language. We do activities, where the deaf people who have attended have commented that they've learned so much about the linguistics, that linguistic aspect of their language, and also it's a very mutual relationship. We also have a great partnership. Our student Kansas Association of Interpreters Club, our SCI Club, does silent dinners every month, and they have created a great partnership with local organizations. So every month they do a silent dinner at a restaurant who will give proceeds back, and they pick one of the deaf organizations for those proceeds to go to. So next week, they're actually having one at a Red Robin, and the proceeds are going to go to the, I think it's, oh no, I don't want to misspeak. It's either the Club for the Deaf or the Deaf Cultural Center, and then every month they do that. We are one of the communities fortunate to still have a deaf club, very active, and they have Olingo every month, and our students attend that and sometimes volunteer to help with serving dinner beforehand or those sorts of things. So we try very hard to provide opportunities for, as Linda mentioned, students to volunteer and provide a service to the community and not just be attending something for the purpose of learning the language and taking that, if you will, but also providing opportunities for them to give back. So I'll stop there and let Lori take over with her response.
Thanks, Stacy. Lori? Great. I think we do lots of the same thing that Stacy does. One of our deaf faculty members hosts a game night the third Friday of every month, and it came out about, her growing up in the deaf community and the deaf club and how, there are lots of different games that went on, and bingo on the third Saturday of the month. And so about maybe 2 years ago now, she decided to host a game night, and she just had some games like Twister and Uno, different games, and she put it on her Facebook page, and then we advertised it in the department, and had quite a few members of the deaf community come as well as students. And so it started out with about 15 or 20 people, and now usually she gets about 60 people on the third Friday of the month. That's one thing. I think the more formal thing in our program is we have a very strong advisory board that meets twice a year, and our advisory board has a great representation from the deaf community. We're really fortunate to have a deaf doctor, MD, who is very active in our advisory board, a deaf Catholic priest, and then some graduates of our program who are deaf, and as well as the VR counselors and deaf ed teachers. And so our advisory board, of which 50% of them are deaf, are very active in our program, and they kind of connect us to their specific groups. We do a lot of things in the community that include the deaf community. Every year we have a talent show. That's really a fundraiser for our scholarship, but our students, we don't have any judges or anything, and really faculty get up there and we just make fools out of ourselves, and the students love it, and students are involved, and we've got people citing songs, but lots of skits, and we talk about being more deaf friendly, and we've got some deaf students performing. We had a deaf student from Russia this year and a deaf student from Afghanistan performing poetry and skits about their native country, and a lot of members. We have between 700 and 1,000 people in the last couple of years come to this talent show. A lot of members of the deaf community come. On campus, in terms of Lucy's question, because we have the deaf and hard of hearing services here, all the campus different events like Black History Month and Hispanic Heritage Month, National Coming Out Month is this next in a couple of weeks. Contact us, and our students, along with one of our certified interpreters, provide interpreting for all the different events on campus. And that allows our deaf students, which we have between 35 and 50 every semester, to be able to walk into any event and know that it's going to be interpreted. They don't have to request for it in advance. But it also gives our students opportunities that they wouldn't usually get in terms of, interpreting for a large audience on stage. All of our plays at the college are interpreted by some of our working interpreters as well as our interns that semester, and then we invite the deaf community to come. We have a connection club, which is our student club, and it's comprised of deaf and hearing students, and they've been very active in giving back to the deaf community. Last year they provided turkey dinners and really a whole week's worth of food for 11 families who were identified by different agencies who needed help. The same thing at Christmas. So the Connection Club has given money to support the San Antonio Women's Softball League to pay $500 for their uniforms, or the high school deaf dance group. And so our students have been very supportive of giving back to the community in terms of just going to different events, but also in fundraising and giving money or things like that to the events. I think the rest of this we will cover in different other questions, so I'm going to hush for now because we're getting short on time and lots of other people have things that they want to share.
All right, Lori, thank you so much for your comments. Lawrence, do you want to add anything else about the deaf community involvement or the campus community in your program?
I think that Stacy and Lori have covered a lot of the territory and things we try and do. We've got a school for the deaf, Kentucky School for the Deaf, about 35 miles away, and we try and partner with them and give back to them, and also look for the Kentucky Association of Deaf to give back to, and the deaf community across Kentucky in different ways. And things that Stacy and Lori said sound familiar in the sense of things we try to do too. I think that's really important, and I don't think we can ever do enough of that. Real briefly, in terms of the academic part, one of the things we've tried to do is both the CODAs, the hearing, and the deaf faculty and staff here have made a real strong effort internally to EKU to serve on different college-level committees and university-level committees, not only staying within our department, of course, which is easy for us to do with the communication. Everybody knows how that works, but to go forth and make an effort to be involved. And I think that's made a positive impact for the recognition, the credibility, all those types of things that I think is one of the struggles we all traditionally face, not as much anymore, but traditionally face in an interpreter training or education program in academics. Becoming accredited CCIE certainly made an impact for us within the College of Education where we're housed, because so many of the other departments and degree programs have some type of accreditation with them or assigned to them or required by their majors, or required by the department to hold. I think that's important. I think that becoming a department, as I mentioned, got us a different type of recognition. And so I think in academics it's always a bit of a struggle. It's certainly getting easier to gain the recognition in the same footing as other programs or other departments. But I think one of the efforts we really tried to do internally is to go forth and be involved across the university. And I think that's paid back to us in a number of ways by gaining support from our dean, the vice presidents, the provost, the president, so on and so forth, and gaining that type of rapport that I think is important for all of us to prosper in academics. Thank you.
Thank you, Lawrence. Linda, do you want to add to the conversation here, the question about deaf community and academic community?
Just briefly, one of the things that, or one of the ways that the deaf students here on campus interact with our interpreting students is they did a first ever on our campus ASL flash mob. And so, fun activities where the deaf students and interpreting students can intermingle together is great. One of the things, I'll just tell you about one of our innovative things that we're doing for the first time this semester is in our revised BA, we have 2 courses where we're going to take the students into the community with deaf people in order to do the mock interpreting. So rather than do it in our classroom, we decided that we would go to those environments where interpreters will later work. So we have a medical school, we have a law school, and so on. So we have ample opportunity to work with, say, resident doctors to get, to provide real, say, a physical, minor physical, or advice on diabetes or something, and have our students interpret so that the deaf people are participating in training interpreters and perhaps training doctors about interpreters. And at the same time, they may be getting something of value or just knowing that they're participating. We're going to go to food stamp office. We'll probably, we'll do religious settings, noonday services. We have, we'll spend 5 weeks in each setting. And so we may do a lawyer's office, just so it happens my son is a lawyer, and, and also in a courtroom. So we're going to try to marry deaf community involvement with the greater community for the education of our interpreting students, and also get a little more exposure to interpreters into these areas. We're very, very excited about this. So we'll let you know how it goes. And I think that many of the things the previous panelists have said I could echo, but I don't need to. So that's going to end. Thank you.
All right, Linda, thank you. Thank you very much. I am noticing, first of all, I want to thank our panelists for so generously sharing these amazing ideas, because I think part of my hope for this evening was to offer some questions, generate more questions collectively, and then share ideas and strategies. And we'll talk a little bit more about that, but so far these have been amazing, very, very innovative ideas. I want to come back to a couple of the comments here and just say that we've got a comment from Suzette out there just suggesting and reminding us that deaf mentors can be utilized through distance education and be contracted as part of the college programs too through distance technologies. And I just want to put that out there in this forum, and then also say that I think that this is a question that can generate a lot of really cool ideas that I will put out on the listserv so that we can collectively flesh that out a little bit more. And then Catherine is also suggesting and offering up this idea of deaf folks being a part of the activities, and then working with deaf children, which is another really nice twist on all of this, to be able to look at resources within a community and look at those from a different light, not only deaf adults, but also deaf children, which is also beneficial in lots of different ways. I am cognizant of our time. We're sitting at about, in Central Time, about 8:13, and so we've got several questions left. What I would like to do, because our panelists have in some way, shape, or form mentioned internship placements and how they've worked with that, I would like to skip that question right now, knowing, of course, or reminding everybody that that question will be on the listserv, so we can work through that a little bit more on that, in that avenue. But I would like to go ahead and skip ahead to the next question, which is, what other challenges do you believe interpreter education programs may be facing in the coming years? So looking at this more from a projection of, based on what we know so far, based on what you've seen, what you've experienced, what you've done, what do you think are some of the challenges that interpreter education programs will be facing in the coming years in terms of community involvement and resources, capacity in terms of resources and other areas? So Linda, I'm going to ask you to get us started on that question. What do you think?
Well, that's a very timely question. Today is our first day of classes, and we've been meeting all week with the chancellor and the dean and the department chair, and these are exactly the questions that are being asked. Of course, I don't have the crystal ball, but I know that issues facing our state and our university are very similar to others. We're moving to a more reduced number of hours to guarantee graduation in 4 years. The whole emphasis is on graduation. So we've had to reduce our program from 131 hours to 120. Actually, we're at 124, but we're having to seek legislative approval for that. So I think how to do what we're doing with less time is a critical issue. I think that money is going to continue to be a problem. I believe that grants are going to be harder to get, more competitive, and there'll be less money for students. Hence, I think students are going to need more paid internships. I think that when we talk about distance ed, and we participate in that, where is the deaf community? Everything we've talked about tonight is generally using our local deaf community. But I like the comment about using technology to access deaf folks at a distance. But I think we really need to think about who is our deaf community, because they're changing. They're not like the older deaf folks that I grew up with. And so who is the deaf community that our students will be interpreting? And where are they? And how can they be accessed? So I think programs must deal with that. How to supervise interns at a distance. Again, technology will provide us the answer. So rather than face-to-face, we may be Skyping in or having students record themselves and submit work to us online, which is already happening. So certainly, the push for more accountability, greater number of graduates, stronger recruitment. The question we ask is, it's almost like retention at all costs. How do you retain, or do you retain students who really need to be counseled out of the program? And if those numbers of people who were counseled out actually hurt your program in terms of funding, how do you balance those kinds of issues? So I think retention versus quality, a push for larger class sizes and higher graduation rates, money, and delivery of services is unique. We are providing, we had an intern last summer go to the University of Graz, do his internship in Austria. We have a relationship with their interpreting program there, and that necessitated some extra learning that wasn't part of our curriculum, such as German, and he was highly involved in research. So we also, I think, at higher ed, we're looking at the AA to VA partnership, which has been my involvement for a long time. What's going to happen to two-year interpreting degrees if they're no longer required, if they're not viable for certification testing, to sit for testing. So I think partnership is vitally important for the future of interpreter ed. What about master's programs? We have several. We'll probably need more. And also, I think that there is going to be a push from the private for-profit educational companies and the private for-profit universities, such as Phoenix, that are going to be competing with the traditional public or private 2- or 4-year institution. We already see that happening in our university, and what's going to happen when those folks, if they decide to get involved in interpreter ed. There's a lot of money behind those resources, and they're profit-making. I don't know the answer to that, but that's something that we as a university are certainly facing. So those are the only ones that I can think of. I think there's many, many more. We certainly need to move to more practices that are evidence-based, and that will form our curriculum development. So I think it's a very exciting time to be an interpreter ed. It's kind of scary, and I think many of these issues will be faced by our predecessors, at least for me. I'm And even such things as when we have the hologram, beam me in interpreter, and we've seen that work 4 years ago at the presidential thing. So there's lots of exciting things out there, a lot of things we don't know, and the learning curve is going to be very steep. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Linda. Lawrence?
Linda, I think you hit a whole lot of the topics that are really important. I think retention and quality, accountability, and how many students are graduating per semester is something our administration is always asking us, and funding is always going to be an issue. And I think it's even tougher in today's world. I'm just going to go off to the side here a little bit and just make a comment that Linda touched on too, that I think is something that I've seen, and deaf community has commented to me about this quite a bit. One of the things that I like about where our profession is heading is we continue to recognize that training is important. We've gone, of course, from certificate programs to 2-year programs, baccalaureate programs. We're heading towards graduate programs, and I think that has a real plus. One of my fears, one of the challenges that I think we're going to see, and one of the things that's been commented to me about the whole credentialing process of interpreters, the credentialing of people to teach interpreting or teach ASL, and the whole movement towards graduate programs, is the deaf community saying, you folks in academics are losing that deaf-friendly aspect. You are becoming the ivory towers. You are becoming one of those. And I think we've all have the ability and all have looked back on teacher training just in regular education, nursing, you name it. You can look at different professions, and they started out much like we started out, and that is with certificate, 1-year, 2-year degrees, so on and so forth. And I think one of our challenges is going to be to keep that connection with the community, to keep that connection in terms of being seen as a deaf-friendly environment for deaf people to feel comfortable buying into and supporting what our mission is and what we're doing. And for us in academics not to lose touch with that, because I think it's a possibility. I don't think people want that to happen. I think people really are trying to keep that connection. But there's also a tremendous push to push the number of degrees, to push the number of degrees that we had at the graduate level, so on and so forth, to larger numbers, all those forces that can push us who are training interpreters to perhaps lose some of that connection with the community, and perhaps the community to look at us as not seeing us as people who are invested in them, the deaf community. So that's one thought. I think keeping our culture and our history and our heritage alive is very important too. And it's all wrapped into one large how do we do this type of question, which I really wish I had an answer to, but I'm trying to keep in touch with the community and keep in touch with the academic part too, and keep those things balanced. Thank you.
Thank you, Lawrence. Stacy, additional comments?
Yes. Hello?
Yep, we can hear you, Stacy. Go ahead.
Oh, you can. Good. I thought I lost it. You can hear me okay. All right. Wonderful. So I love the fact that Lawrence brought up this idea related to not losing the community involvement. I think that's critical, and it's a lot of the feedback I've heard as well. The ways that we've involved the deaf community here has been so wonderful, and at the same time, one of the challenges is to compensate them. We do honorariums when we can. We do, reciprocity when we can. We are fortunate that our budget for Silent Weekend allows us to pay honorariums to all of the deaf people who come, but that's a challenge. Another thing I think is continuing to involve deaf colleagues in the education of interpreting specifically, and not just the language component, which then creates challenges as well. Here I have done a lot of co-teaching with deaf colleagues, and it's hard. The deaf colleagues who I've worked with have been very frustrated at trying to continue to teach language and teach culture, and then on top of that teach interpreting, and that's frustrating to try to be pulled in both directions is kind of how they feel, and the workload is so heavy. So for me, I think just being aware of, I guess, the hearing privilege that many of us in interpreting education have, and to just be aware of how we can continue to support our deaf colleagues in being very present in interpreter education, not only as a community, but also as very much people who are either working to become interpreters themselves or want to be directly involved with the education of interpreters.
Thank you, Stacy. Lori, I'm going to give you the last couple minutes of the evening to respond to this one, and then I'll have a couple of comments to kind of summarize where we're going with this.
Okay. I think everyone has touched on so much that we are dealing with. In fact, at our convocation on Monday, they talked about that the push for Alamo colleges, of which San Antonio College is part of, forever has been enrollment, and that is no longer the push. That the push is now graduation and course completion and completion of a certificate. And we, because we're part of the professional technical education, have different kind of requirements than the arts and sciences, and now the arts and sciences are kind of having to catch up with us, so to speak. But you know, we still are looking at graduation numbers, and because we require our students to pass our state certification test, that becomes even more challenging for us. And what do we do if they don't pass it? And you know, what safeguards do we have in place so that if they don't pass it, these are the things. We have a mentoring program and some courses that are specific to give them more time on task. But one of the things that we're looking at, because we only have one bachelor's program in the state of Texas that's relatively new at the University of Houston, is our college has gone forward to the coordinating board with interpreter training and fire science to offer a bachelor's of, actually I've asked for a bachelor's of applied science degree to be offered at the community college level, and we've certainly gotten support from the college and from the district, not so much support from the four-year colleges. They feel like maybe we're stepping on their toes, but none of the four-year colleges that feel that way are wanting to start an interpreter training program. So those are some of the things that we're dealing with you know, the challenges of the future. And right now the state of Texas is saying that we have to have 15 graduates every 3 years in order to maintain our program, which I think for some programs is a challenge, especially programs that are relatively small in a small area, a small part of Texas, where they don't have a lot of enrollment, and to get those numbers are difficult for them. We're just, you know, every day trying to be more innovative and do more with less, and make sure that we're serving the needs of our students and the deaf community. And it is certainly a balancing act and a juggling act every single day.
Lori, I can't think of a better way to end our conversation than recognizing and honoring the juggling act that we're doing every single day. Thank you very much. I'm going to just say that I want to thank our panelists, thank our interpreters, thank all of the participants for being so actively involved in this conversation. The listserv is going to be open on the 27th, which is Monday, and I want to encourage each and every one of you, especially those of you who are making great comments on the side here, to head to the listserv, take these thoughts and comments there, and let's unpack these a little more to get to some of those solutions and strategies and ideas that we can address collectively to address some of these challenges. And at this point, Carrie, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Thank you, Paula. I again want to thank you for all that you've done, and our great panelists and our interpreters, Kirk and Darlene. And of course our captain is Sharon James, and we wouldn't be here without Jesse, Josh, and their team at the National Clearinghouse. Now I need to give you some reminders. RID CEUs can be requested by completing the CEU request form that will appear after the satisfaction survey is completed. The survey will open once you close out of the webinar software. Submit the survey, and then you will see a screen where you can click on a form to request CEUs. The form must be filled out to receive RID CEUs. If the survey doesn't automatically open when you close out, go to the web page for the webinar that was provided in the email sent to you today with the link to access the webinar tonight. The link to the survey is at the bottom of the page. Also, a group sign-in sheet was attached to the email that was sent to you today. If you watched in a group of individuals, please have everyone sign in and then submit the form. Or one person can fill out the form electronically, save it, and then you mail it to me. CEUs can be rewarded with the sign-in sheet or the survey. Everyone is encouraged to complete the survey, including those who are not seeking CEUs. As Paula mentioned, the listserv will begin on Monday, and you will have an opportunity to explore this topic more in depth. Please look for the email that will be sent out tomorrow. And I think that's it. Thank you very much for attending.
Thank you, everybody. Good night.
Thank you. This is Lars. Good night.
Good night, Paula. This is Lori. Thanks for all your work to put this together.
This is Linda.
Yes.
Thanks.
This is Stacy. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Good night. Jesse, can you still hear me?